It might be too little too late. Plus, why you should be okay with the Mariners trading a starting pitcher. That's all coming up on this episode of Bleav in Mariners. What is up, sports fans? What is up, Mariners fans? Here with episode 12 of Bleav in Mariners. Schultzy or Jordon Schultz, refer to me as whichever, a Pacific Northwest talk show host. Struggling to root. I mean, I'm happy for my Seattle Mariners, kind of sticking with it, right? Still in it as I tape this, a game and a half out of the wild card race with just 5 games remaining in the regular season. But it's been a tough slog to be a Seattle Mariners fan, not just like the last month, but really the last week or two, because all of a sudden you see him turn it on. The offense is batting out of their booties. Julio Rodriguez leading the way, a stretch of 5 home runs in 8 games at one point in the last week and a half or so. I mean, we've seen the Mariners turning it on at the right time of the season. It's been nice. Some success against Houston earlier in the series against them. Bryce Miller throwing 7 shutout innings, just 2 hits in that series opener. We're going to break all of that down, and we'll take a look at their playoff odds. They're actually crazy higher than they were last week, of course, because the Mariners are so close in the wild card, and there's so many teams fighting for the wild card. But I wanted to start with this, and this is a very bold statement here that I think some fans might really need to hear. It's one that I've kind of really gotten to let ruminate and actually accept over the past month or so in my mind. But definitely a very bold statement. But hear me out, Mariners fans. You should be okay with Seattle trading a starting pitcher during the offseason. And here's why. Let's break it down for you. So, I mean, there's a couple of reasons behind this. I know that the Seattle Mariners essentially have been really good at developing pitching talent. Young pitchers have turned into studs, not just 1, not just 2, not just 3, not just 4, but literally 5. You've seen many guys in the last just 3 years, more than a handful, not just starting pitchers, but bullpen pitchers as well, come through Seattle's pitching program, have success, really able to tweak something, or, Pete Woodward and the pitching staff were able to find something that maybe in their delivery or their angling or the way that they're pitching in certain situations just isn't right, or there's a pitch that they should be leaning on in a certain situation. And the Mariners pitching coaches have been almost magical with the way that they've been able to get just something out of, basically complete nobodies at the time, but made guys like Justin Topa and Gabe Spire into legitimate MLB relievers. So good on them. Taylor Saucedo, Penn Murphy, guys that you didn't really hear about at the beginning of the season, but then all of a sudden, a month in to the year, the Mariners call them up and they're nails. So a lot of starting pitching talent, a lot of bullpen talent that the Mariners have had through their organization that they've been so successful with. But really, you look at, it was a tweet by Codify actually put this out. Most games this year with 6+ innings and 0 runs allowed. 2 Mariners are in the top 4. Bryce Miller overall with 9. Dylan Cease at 7, along with Zach Wheeler and current Mariner Logan Gilbert, as well as 11 guys with 6. So, I mean, just an example right there of how great all these starting pitchers have been. Jose Altuve said of Bryce Miller after that start to open the series against Houston, the second to last series of the regular season for Seattle, said he was obviously throwing the 2-seam, 4-seam fastballs. Seemed like wherever he wants. He had the split, the slider. So he was doing really good today. Sometimes, like I always say, you have to tip your hat. He was almost unhittable today. Jose Altuve even speaking very, very kindly of Bryce Miller after that really great performance. Just, you've seen this growth in the last year in front of our eyes as Bryce Miller has added like that split finger to be able to get left-handed hitters out and turn into not just like a fastball pitcher, but really somebody that can locate, that throws a hard fastball, and that knows kind of how to toy with guys. It really looks like, in just his short time in the last year in the majors, we've literally seen him turn into a stud starting pitcher, somebody that any team in Major League Baseball would like at the top of their rotation. You add that to Brian Wu, of course. I mean, Brian Wu's had one of the best half of seasons, I think, in recent memory for pitchers. And overall this year, 8-3 with a 3.02 ERA and 21 starts and 116 innings pitched. Obviously, much more of that coming in recent success. And then I would say the ERA would be lower if it weren't for Brian Wu getting blown up last week. But yeah, you just continue to look down the line, and then Gilbert nearly at the top of all the starting pitching stat categories for Major League Baseball. He's over 200 strikeouts this year with 207. So, and then obviously Luis Castillo before he went down, nearly at 200 strikeouts, getting close to that point with 175, maybe getting him for one more start this year. It sounds like he did throw a bullpen either Tuesday or Wednesday for Seattle. So maybe we'll see him starting in Houston on Thursday, or maybe they will throw him out there for the final game of the regular season. And of course, George Kirby been very good as well, and one of the youngest, best pitchers in the game, making the All-Star team last season. There's really nothing bad that you can say about Mariners starting pitchers. However, I guess overall, there is one thing you can say about the Seattle Mariners as a team, is despite their starting pitching, they are still fighting for a playoff spot. They aren't in the playoffs. They're not guaranteed a playoff spot. They don't have that 10-game lead that they did in the AL West earlier this season. That was because of chaos ball. It had nothing to do with really good hitters, but their pitchers were pitching well at like elite levels at the time. And it just didn't matter. And I think that one thing we figured out, unfortunately, with the 2024 Seattle Mariners, and I'm pretty sure I heard Jeff Passan say this at one point with Brock and Salk on 710, maybe a month ago, but it really is true, and we're really seeing it now with the hitters and the way that they've been able to kind of pick up the slack that we've been wondering, like what the heck's been happening in Seattle, what's going on in that clubhouse. But with Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez taking everything over, been able to pick up that slack and really show us in Seattle like what this team could possibly be if guys 1 through 9 are producing, and if Jerry Dipoto actually puts the right guys on the field. Because let's not forget, like, to start the season, we were still seeing Luis Urias thrown out there as a legitimate option who was supposed to platoon at third base and get you where? To the playoffs? First place in the AL West? No, not with guys like that. Going to get Randy Arozarena and going to get Justin Turner, true winners. Yeah, those are the kinds of guys that it's going to take. And we've seen that success in the last half of the season. Actually, Justin Turner, great point to bring him up. Saw a tweet from Cognac Jelly. It was, I believe, earlier this week. Justin Turner in the month of September, 299 average, 398 on base percentage, 861 OPS, 7 extra base hits, 13 base on balls, and 6 RBIs. This is all the contribution by a 39-year-old veteran, and it has been huge recently. And yeah, nails by Justin Turner as well. He's making $13 million in a 1-year deal that the Blue Jays signed him to. I would assume that the Mariners can get him for like half that next year, maybe like $5 million, since he'll be turning 40. The production's still there, but he is getting older, so would love to see him coming back. I think having him on the bench as like a coach, faux like coach / player that hits, say 300-400 times a year, gets 80 to 100, games in. He's not playing every single game, but he's DHing a lot. He's maybe spelling some guys in the infield if they need a break, or some late inning pinch hitting. I mean, like, there's a lot of options, I think, with a really great veteran piece like Justin Turner. If he wants to re-sign in Seattle, though, of course, that is something to be seen. But to add to that, we're talking about bringing a guy like Justin Turner back. We're talking about bringing a Randy Arozarena back, which you hope that the Mariners do. The combination in the outfield of Victor Robles, who, once again, been the best hitter in Major League Baseball, basically the last half of the season, since August 15th. This was put out by East Coast M's, a 409 average, 199 WRC plus, a 2.0 WAR, 472 on base percentage, 440 WOBA, and a 468 BABIP, which is a batting average on balls in play, as well as 16 stolen bases. All are first, second, or third in their respective categories in Major League Baseball. Not the American League, but all of MLB. Victor Robles has been the key addition, and signing him to a very cheap and team-friendly, 2-year, $10-ish million contract. It's exactly what the Mariners want going forward, but somebody that's not going to be as cheap as Randy Arozarena. So you figure, well, all right, these numbers that you see at the salary cap, you got to start kind of looking now when you talk about wanting to trade a starting pitcher or not wanting to trade a starting pitcher. Unfortunately, with the way that the Mariners operate their budget, it's kind of necessary to have to trade a starting pitcher at this point for them, because you're looking at a pretty limited payroll of 140 to 160 million dollars in the last few seasons, right? And I would say that Mariners fans expected them to maybe spend closer to like 200 million, something like that, but no, didn't happen, unfortunately. But you are seeing contracts now with the likes of Logan Gilbert, who's going to be in his second year of arbitration. George Kirby going into his first year of arbitration. Cal Raleigh going into his first year of arbitration. Randy Arozarena going into his second year of arbitration. A lot of these contracts are going to be going up for guys that haven't been making much for the Mariners, specifically. Like, and Arozarena is going to be, we've heard it a lot from Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times, probably around $11-12 million in salary. Yeah, that's a bit more that he's making now. Cal's going to be going from like the league minimum to about 4. Logan Gilbert's going to be going from about 4 to about 7. And I mean, so you look at all of these, arbitration contracts. There's a couple of bullpen guys that are going to be first-time arbitration eligible. JT Chargois, if the Mariners want to keep him around, he's making 1.8 and is going to be arbitration eligible as well. So that there's, I would say around, gosh, if I had to just like kind of roughly add it up, 15 to 20 million bucks of money just in arbitration that the Seattle Mariners are going to have to dole out. It seems, unfortunately, unless you consider trading a starting pitcher if you are the Seattle Mariners, it seems, unfortunately, that their options are limited on what they can do going forward to try to add hitters to the lineup. And a lot of Mariners fans are saying, oh, well, the Mariners can just get rid of Mitch Haniger's contract. Not so fast. He has like an opt-out, but I don't think he is going to be opting out because yeah, Mitch Garver has a $15.5 million salary coming to him next season if he does not opt out. So, no, the $17.5 million hitting the salary cap this season is probably going to be hitting the Mariners salary cap next season unless they decide to like do a Jared Kelnick like trade essentially and trade one of their top prospects or one of their great young hitters, moving them along with a Mitch Haniger to try to get rid of some of that salary. And I honestly hope they don't do that. At this point, though, you've got to find some cash. And I do believe that a way to do that is to get rid of Mitch Haniger. Thankfully, they're not going to be paying Jorge Polanco next year. I would have guessed that they're going to be moving on. It's a club option for $12 million for him. But I don't think that there's really any way after the first half of the season that they had that they'd be comfortable with paying him $12 million. I really hope that the Mariners go with like a Ryan Bliss at that point. There are a couple of positions or maybe like at least one in the infield that the Mariners can supplement with a younger player in their farm system, but you cannot with this nucleus, with the nucleus of Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez and Victor Robles. And if you go forward with Randy Arozarena and Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, all of these really talented players that and Wu and Miller and Kirby and Gilbert, all top of the line starters on other teams, you cannot waste this playoff window. That means not wasting at bats on guys like Luis Arias anymore, not wasting at bats on mediocre has-beens like Tommy Listelis. Like Jerry Dipoto has got to completely change his thinking going forward. And what does that mean to the Mariners' approach as far as acquiring like proven true hitters? Unfortunately, I think that means trading a starting pitcher. But as I was saying a few minutes ago, hear me out, guys. Trading a starting pitcher doesn't necessarily look like the worst thing in the world when you kind of overall look at the season that the Mariners have had in 2024, right? All right, they're at 81 wins as I tape this episode, but still fighting for a spot in the playoffs. Not guaranteed, not in that 10-game lead, because pitching alone cannot sustain a team through a 162-game season. And two really good players and a bunch of has-beens or never was's or hope to be agains cannot get you to a World Series. But you know what can? 3 really good starting pitchers and a full lineup, 4 good starting pitchers and a full lineup 1 through 9. And unfortunately, the way that the Mariners accomplish that is essentially giving up one of their strong points, which is starting pitching, for once again, not a decent hitter, but a really good hitter. a young, very controllable hitter that's already proven himself in Major League Baseball. So, I mean, if you ask like who you want to trade first, I mean, you can take a look and see like what you could get for Luis Castillo, a 31-year-old, really great pitcher. But you wonder if there's going to be injury questions going into his later 30s. You wonder, how many innings he's pitched already, if that's going to catch up to him in his career. So I'm just not sure that any team is willing, unless you're, a Justin Verlander or a Max Scherzer, to trade a top of the line, like either top level prospect or top of the line young elite hitter for a guy like that. But if you start to go down the line and you look at Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, that looks like it's a little more attractive of a trade for another team, because they're in their 20s. They're still a little bit controllable by that team, but they're already aces. And if they wanted to sign them to a deal upon trading for them, they probably immediately could. And then you look at like Bryce Miller and Brian Wu. I think the Mariners are, after the success that they've seen from these two guys, a little too tentative to trade them. So yeah, I think the optimum situation for Seattle going forward, and this, once again, this is after a lot of realization. This is after kind of just a period of anger, and then getting into acceptance, but not really acceptance of Jerry DiPoto's crappy management style and his inability to put an offense onto the field, but really acceptance that 5 elite starting pitchers, y'all, are not going to get you to the playoffs. So if the Mariners have a surplus of something other teams want, starting pitching, where they can get a young player back, that's controllable, that's close to elite or is elite, then you got to pull the trigger on it. And I think you have to be comfortable with that as a Mariners fan. And there is a great question to ask after you answer the question, should you trade a starting pitcher or not? My answer to that is yes. And if you do trade a starting pitcher, who are you going to target? It's one thing to just throw out there as a Mariners fan, like, oh yeah, they need to trade a starting pitcher, go get a hitter. But it's another thing to know, all right, who do you think would fit? Who do you think they could go acquire? And I think that there are some names possible out there that could make a deal like this work. Corbin Carroll for the Arizona Diamondbacks. I feel like Arizona is in need of some starting pitching. That might be an attractive one for them to consider. I think the Oakland Athletics have one in Lawrence Butler. I think he'd be a great return. Hell, I wouldn't mind if you said trade Kirby straight up for Lawrence Butler and another hitter on the A's. I'd do it. I'd do it in a heartbeat. What about like a Zach Neto from the Angels? That ruffle anybody's skirt? I love Zach Neto. Young shortstop. He's hit. He's literally done nothing but hit since he came into the league with the Angels. All 3 of these guys like that as well out there. There are a couple of more, but those are the 3 that stuck out to me the most. Guys like that have proven themselves, that are still young, under team control. Unfortunately, though, yeah, there's a couple more. There aren't that many guys, though. So then you kind of start to wonder, well, if you can't pull a deal off like that, you wonder if Seattle's going to start to look at like third baseman Ryan McMahon for the Colorado Rockies. Another really good young player, had his first All-Star appearance in 2024. But once again, you've got to try to find a deal with a team that is maybe thinking that they're close to the playoffs. They just need a little bit of pitching, but so close to the playoffs that they're willing to give up one of their great young hitters. And I'm just not sure that you would find a team willing to do that without like a top of the line offer. And that's why I think like a Logan Gilbert or a George Kirby kind of deal would be able to get something done for the Seattle Mariners. I'm not sure Luis Castillo deal would. And I just don't think Seattle's going to be taking calls on Brian Wu and Bryce Miller, unfortunately. But going forward, with the way that Jerry DiPoto has kind of hamstrung the Mariners, or John Stanton has hamstrung Jerry DiPoto, who's then in turn hamstrung the Seattle Mariners, I unfortunately do think the best plan of action is for the Mariners to trade a starting pitcher. And you should be okay with it. And really simply because that the Mariners cannot get to the playoffs without 5 elite starting pitchers, but they will get to the playoffs with 3 or 4, and one of those starting pitchers being traded for an elite hitter. All right, that's my take on that. That's kind of my rant on how I think the Mariners could get better this offseason. Kind of had that thought last night. And then this morning, hearing Jeff Passan talking about it on Brock and Salk was like, hey, all right, we're all on the same page here, hopefully, anyways, as Mariners fans. If you're not, let me know on the air, Jordan with an O on X, or hit me up on our Bleav in Mariners YouTube channel. Leave a comment. Would love to debate it with you. Really quickly, the Houston Astros, of course, trying to clinch the AL West with a win over Seattle. Basically, any win over the Mariners would clinch the AL West for them, but Seattle looking strong. Unfortunately, it might be too little too late. That series opening win for the Mariners, 6-1 over Houston, was awesome. Julio Rodriguez continuing his hot streak, 3 more hits in that one, 2 RBIs. He had that crucial double to extend Seattle's lead in Monday's game. Yeah, Mariners bats really have been showing up and keeping them within striking distance of a wild card spot. So that's been encouraging to see. The win, of course, part of that really strong stretch, other than Sunday's game where the Mariners had won 4 out of their last 5. Man, that game on Sunday was a freaking heartbreaker. And that is something, unfortunately, you can't blame on Scott Service or Jerry DiPoto or the way that the Mariners are running their organization. You blame that one on the players. You blame that one on the pitchers. But also you look at just a long season that the bullpen has had. I mean, it's almost expected for them to run out of gas at this point. So sucks to see, but unfortunately, that did keep the Mariners from getting just a half a game out of the wild card earlier in the week. But yeah, they are right on that playoff bubble. They have been pretty good in the last week and a half or so now, with a 10% plus chance to get into the playoffs, if you can believe it. So the Mariners are in the thick of it. Just 1.5 games back of the final wild card spot with just 5 games remaining. Every game is a must win at that at this point. Essentially, you can't lose to the Astros. If you do, you're out of the AL West, and you are depending on Detroit, Kansas City, or Minnesota losing and basically needing to win out every single game for yourself as well. Adam Jude at Seattle Times actually did a really great breakdown of this. Basically said that the M's have to finish a full game ahead of the 2 teams fighting for the final wild card spot right now. Of course, it is Detroit holding the wild card spot right now, but whether it be them, the Royals, or the Twins, they've got to win one more game than the standings say. So essentially, the Mariners, if they go 4-1 in their final 5 games, the Twins need to finish 3-3 in their final 6. And the Tigers or Royals, either of them, not both of them, but either of them needs to finish 2-4 in their final 6. But unfortunately, Detroit has been pretty hot. They've got 3 games against the Rays and 3 games against the White Sox, all in the city of Detroit. And the Royals on a 7-game losing streak coming into the game that I am taping this before. They have 3 games in Washington against the Nationals and 3 games in Atlanta against the Braves. The Twins not doing so well either, losing 13 of their last 19. So definitely a shot for Seattle to get in. And the bigger shot, obviously, is the wild card. Yeah, that 10% chance, it is there, and it is double what it was last week. So yeah, we still have a shot, Mariners fans, to quote Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber, there is still a chance. You're saying there's a chance. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be tough with the Astros, Tigers, Royals, and Twins all trying for the same spots as either the AL West title or for the AL wild card. We'll see if it can be done. I do think, though, if Seattle could have, 2 games earlier started their resurgence, like a week maybe. I heard Jeff Passan say 2 weeks. I don't even think that. I think like a week. I think a week earlier, the Mariners would be in the playoffs right now, would be holding one of those wild card spots. But as I said on one of my last episodes of Bleav in Mariners, do you really think that they would look that great in the playoffs playing really elite teams? They lost 2 to the Yankees last week that we all remember, guys. 11-2. Heartbreaker, beat down, and then a 2-1 loss where they couldn't get any hits strung together. And that has been the story for them, unfortunately, too much of this season. But hopefully they can do it. I'll be rooting for them, and we will hopefully be talking next week, not only about, we've got one more episode to tape this week, and we will hopefully be talking next week about a playoff berth for the Seattle Mariners. And if not, trying to figure out how they're going to fix this thing going forward. But that's going to do it for this episode of Bleav in Mariners. Make sure you give the podcast a 5-star rating and review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. Or if you're watching on YouTube, give the channel Bleav in Mariners a like and subscribe. Also, give a comment on the video. You know, the algorithm loves all that interaction. Also, if you are a former Mariners player or you know a former Seattle Mariners player that wants a media opportunity, hit me up. Please either at On The Air Jordan on Twitter or hit Bleav Up. We'll get in touch with you and we'll make it happen for you. Would really love to bring that perspective onto this show. But thank you so much, Mariners fans, for tuning in. Stay safe and keep those tridents up. See you soon.